What if I told you that for over 13,000 years, an alien probe has been silently orbiting our planet, watching us? It's a story that reaches back to the dawn of the radio age, passes through Cold War paranoia, and lands squarely in the digital era, where a single photograph convinced millions that we are not alone. It's called the Black Knight satellite, and its legend has only grown stronger. But what if the truth behind the Black Knight is even stranger than the myth? What if the real story reveals something profound, not about aliens, but about ourselves? Today, we're tracing every thread of this cosmic legend, from a mad scientist's laboratory to a scrap of space blanket floating in low Earth orbit. Strap in, we're going satellite hunting. Our story begins not in the future, but in the final year of the 19th century. Nikola Tesla, inventor, visionary, and future namesake of an electric car, was alone in his experimental station in Colorado Springs, conducting ultra-sensitive radio experiments. He was listening to the crackle and hum of the cosmos, and one night he heard something that stopped his heart. A pattern, 3 distinct, evenly spaced pulses. A signal, Tesla wrote, that was of such a clear and unmistakable character that it could not be accidental. He was convinced it came from an intelligent source, perhaps he speculated from Mars. Years later, UFO enthusiasts would point to this moment and declare Tesla had intercepted the Black Knight. But what did he really hear? Today, the scientific consensus is that Tesla likely picked up natural radio emissions from Jupiter's magnetosphere. Something we now know sounds astonishingly like rhythmic clicks. Or possibly the very first transatlantic radio tests by Marconi, which were happening around the same time. Tesla himself later backed away from the alien theory, suggesting he'd detected signals from another planet's magnetic field. But the seed was planted, the idea that an artificial extraterrestrial signal had been heard, and it would lie dormant for over half a century until the skies above Earth suddenly got very crowded. Flash forward to 1954. The space race hadn't officially begun. Sputnik was still 3 years away. And yet, newspapers across the United States ran a startling headline. An artificial satellite had been discovered orbiting Earth. The source was Dr. Lincoln La Paz, a respected astronomer and the head of the University of New Mexico's Institute of Meteoritics. La Paz was interviewed about a strange sighting that had been tracked by several observers. He reportedly suggested that the object, orbiting at 400 miles up, was a dark satellite, potentially of alien origin. This is the first time the phrase dark satellite enters the public consciousness. For conspiracy theorists, it's a bombshell. The US government knew about a mysterious object years before we could even put one up ourselves. But here's where the story warps. A deep dive into the original articles reveals that La Paz never actually said it was an alien probe. He was investigating a possible natural satellite, a small captured asteroid or meteoroid in a temporary orbit. The artificial angle was a sensationalized headline, and the object itself, it vanished from tracking records soon after. The most likely explanation is a transient natural object, a chunk of space rock that briefly got caught in Earth's gravity well before escaping or burning up. A fascinating find, but far from a 13,000-year-old alien sentinel. Still, the monster was beginning to stir. February 1960. The Cold War is at its iciest. The US Navy has built a top-secret radar fence called the Dark Fence, a name too perfect for this story, to detect incoming Soviet missiles. But one day, it picks up something else. A large, dark object tumbling in a near-polar orbit. It was estimated to weigh several tons. It didn't match any known American or Soviet satellite, and it was moving in an orbit that suggested it had been up there for a long time. The press got wind of it. Time magazine called it a dark, silent, and unknown satellite. The military code name assigned to it? The Black Knight. This is the smoking gun, right? A confirmed radar detection, a code name, and a genuine military investigation. Let's dig in. The US Navy, specifically the Dahlgren Space Surveillance Center, did track an unknown object. And yes, a 1961 report referred to it in an analysis of dark fence radar data. The object was in a 79-degree inclination orbit, moving north to south over the poles, which is not a trajectory a Soviet launch would typically use. That alone raised eyebrows. But here's the thing. The Black Knight's identity was never a lasting mystery to the people who tracked it. Within weeks, analysts correlated its orbital parameters with a known event, the failed recovery of the Discoverer 5 capsule. Discoverer was the cover name for the Corona Spy satellite program. On August 13, 1959, Discoverer 5 launched, carrying a return capsule with film. The capsule was supposed to eject, fire retro rockets, and be caught in midair by a plane. Instead, it misfired and was left stranded in orbit. That tumbling 300-pound capsule, coated in a dark heat shield, was exactly the right size and orbit to be the dark object the Navy saw. As the capsule's orbit decayed, it eventually re-entered the atmosphere and burned up. The Black Knight of 1960 was a piece of our own spy hardware, lost and then forgotten by everyone except the myth makers. But the myth was about to get a cosmic upgrade from the wildest corners of Scotland. Meet Duncan Lunan, a science communicator and astronomy enthusiast who in the early 1970s became fascinated by a decades-old radio mystery, the long-delayed echoes. Back in the 1920s, several radio experimenters, including the legendary Carl Stormer, noticed a bizarre phenomenon. They'd send a short radio pulse into the sky, and a fraction of a second later, hear it bounce back. That's normal. But sometimes, they'd hear a second echo, delayed by 3 to 15 seconds, or even stranger, a chaotic series of echoes that lasted minutes. Something up there was reflecting radio waves, but what? Lunan had a radical idea. He plotted the delay times of these echoes on a graph, assuming they weren't just random noise, but a signal from a probe parked at the Earth-Moon L5 Lagrange point, a stable gravitational parking spot. When he interpreted the delays as a sequence, he claimed they formed a star map, a drawing of the constellation Boötes as it appeared 13,000 years ago. Lunan published his findings in 1973, suggesting an alien probe from the star Epsilon Boötes had been orbiting Earth since the last ice age, occasionally responding to our radio signals. He did not, initially, connect it to the Black Knight story, but the internet age would fuse these two legends together into one supermyth. But just one problem, actually two. Lunan himself retracted the theory years later, after astronomers found that the echo recordings he'd relied on were likely caused by plasma turbulence or equipment artifacts. The star map was an illusion of pattern seeking in messy data, but in the world of conspiracy, retractions are just part of the cover-up. Lunan's star map was here to stay. We arrive now at the single most iconic piece of evidence for the Black Knight, a series of photographs taken by astronauts during STS-88. There it is, a strange, almost angular craft. To millions of people scrolling through early internet forums and YouTube compilations, this was undeniable proof. It wasn't a rock, it wasn't a satellite, it looked artificial. The legendary Black Knight, caught in the act. But space is a master illusionist. What you're looking at is a thermal blanket cover, specifically a trunnion pin cover, a fabric shroud that protects the docking mechanisms on the ISS modules. During an extravehicular activity or spacewalk, astronaut Jerry Ross accidentally let one of these covers slip. As it tumbled away, he turned to his crewmate Jim Newman and said, "There goes a thermal cover." NASA logged the lost item. The cover, made of beta cloth and multiple insulation layers, had an irregular, almost bat-like shape. When photographed against the vacuum of space, its crinkled folds and sewn edges created the perfect illusion of a structured alien artifact. The object drifted for months, then burned up in the atmosphere. It was a piece of space trash, not a millennia-old sentinel. Yet, ask the algorithm, and this image has been viewed hundreds of millions of times as the face of the Black Knight. So, how did a handful of disconnected anomalies, Tesla's signals, a misreported meteorite, a lost spy capsule, a retracted star map, and a discarded space blanket coalesce into a single, compelling narrative about a 13,000-year-old alien probe? The answer lies in a fascinating web of storytelling and a name that was waiting to be claimed. In the 1950s, the United Kingdom had a ballistic missile program called, you guessed it, the Black Knight. The name was in the air. Decades later, a 1970s science fiction novel or a UFO magazine article likely plucked that name and attached it to the dark satellite lore. By the time the internet arrived, all the ingredients were in the pot. John Keel, author of The Mothman Prophecies, wrote about a dark satellite in the 1960s, mixing early satellite tracking data with his own cosmic conspiracy theories. Duncan Lunin's star map, despite his retraction, was republished endlessly without context. And then STS-88's photo lit the fuse. Our brains are pattern recognition machines. We are evolutionarily wired to connect dots. The Black Knight myth exploits this brilliantly. Each piece of evidence feels plausible in isolation. Woven together by charismatic storytellers on YouTube and TV, it bypasses our critical thinking and hits us directly in the what-if cortex. What's more, the myth offers a grand cosmic story that a simple thermal blanket can never provide. In a disenchanted age, we hunger for mystery. The Black Knight delivers. There is, however, a sliver of poetic truth buried in this myth. The Black Knight, if we're honest, does exist, not as an alien ambassador, but as a symbol of our own footprint. Right now, over 27,000 pieces of orbital debris are tracked by the Department of Defense. Thousands more are too small to see. Lost covers, exploded rocket stages, flecks of paint moving at 17,000 miles per hour. They are silent, dark, and artificial. They don't transmit star maps, but they do tell a story of a species throwing itself into the cosmos, leaving a ring of trash around its home. In a sense, the Black Knight is a ghost story we tell ourselves about our own creations. When Tesla listened to the stars, he heard the future of communication. When the Navy tracked their dark object, they were wrestling with the reality of the space age. And when we stare at that twisted blanket in the photographs, we are really staring at a mirror, seeing our own yearning for connection reflected back. The truth behind the Black Knight isn't a cover-up. It's a collage of honest mistakes, Cold War secrecy, and human imagination. And yet, the quest to chase down every thread, to find the real thermal cover, to trace the Discoverer capsule, to hear Duncan Lunin admit his error, that quest is its own kind of wonder. The universe is full of real mysteries, fast radio bursts, dark matter, the silent question of whether we are alone. The Black Knight reminds us how powerfully we want the answer to be no. But real science demands we chase the truth, not just the story we want to hear. Keep looking up. Question everything. And don't be afraid to let a beautiful myth crumble, because the actual cosmos, with all its mundane space blankets and lost spy capsules, is still infinitely more fascinating than any fiction. Thanks for watching.